HB1454. This was a big debate in the state Senate this last week. Instead of a one-size-fits-all setback of 200 feet for a landfill from a body of water like a river or a lake or a coastline, now you'd have to have site-specific hydrological testing beforehand to make sure that the effluent from the landfill is not going to make it into the body of water. Essentially, the sidebar here is that this would sink that proposed landfill in Dalton next to Forest Lake State Park. You've expressed some concern. You wanted some changes if this is going to get signed.
So my biggest concern in this bill, it will likely drive up property taxes on virtually every family across the state, and at a time when we're all already dealing with inflation, without really, I think, having the environmental benefits that were anticipated. So we'll have to look at it closely, but I have a lot of concerns about it because it drives up costs without the big environmental win that folks are hoping for.
How would it raise taxes?
Because the cost to dispose your everyday trash is going to go up.
So essentially, from the cost of that study would be passed along to the consumer once the landfill goes in, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah, if the landfill ever went in. I mean, a lot of the provisions that have been put in there would really restrict maybe even having any landfills in the state at all, ultimately, which means we're now sending all of our trash to New York or places like that. That could double or triple the cost of just disposing your everyday trash. So you have to look at the real impacts on families before you make those decisions. And understanding we all want good environmental benefits, but if the big bang isn't there for the massive costs that you're going to have, there's got to be balance in the system.
Thank you, Senator Gray. Senator Sherman.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, just to respond to that, I do not believe the 5-year distance of travel is in current statute, just to clarify prior comments. I'm speaking as someone who has been working in the area of landfills, not really voluntarily, but since 2014, when we first identified a cancer cluster in my neighborhood. I think we really should take a lesson from Coakley. The Coakley landfill sits on the highest point of the seacoast. It's mostly gravel, has some bedrock. It is capped but not lined, and it was a gravel pit. The PFAS, 1,4-dioxane, and other contaminants that are emanating from Coakley right now are contaminating the Little River watershed, the Barry's Brook watershed, and flowing into Bailey's Brook. It's a Superfund site. Were we warned? We were warned. In the early 1970s, a hydrogeologist warned DES, I have a copy of the letter, that this will have a direct impact on drinking water in the area and it could be dire. They went ahead anyway. As part of the Superfund back then, the way they did it, the remedy was a cap. It's an impressive cap. People who lived in the area at the time talked about all the dump trucks that were coming and going and cleaning that up. But it's only a cap. Modern landfills, like the ones that we see going in Rochester and other places, are lined both on the sides and bottom as well as on the top. At Coakley, we've learned that a component of the PFAS leaching from the landfill is actually coming from the cap. They sampled the cap. The cap is impregnated with PFAS. So, lesson number 1, don't site a landfill in the wrong place. Lesson number 2, we can't trust the integrity of either the landfill's lining or even the liner itself, that it won't be leaching contaminants. So what about a setback? What is the most important, or one of the most important things that we preserve in New Hampshire? That's our environment. That is the beauty of the North Country and everywhere around the state. I've been all over the state recently, and it's breathtaking. This is one of the most beautiful states I've ever lived in, if not the most beautiful, and we have to be good stewards of that. So the sole purpose of a setback between new landfills and surface water, no matter where they are in the state, is whether that setback is given in units of distance or of time, is to protect the water. I've served under the Senate President on the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund for the last several years as Vice Chair. I am more knowledgeable about drinking water than I ever thought I'd dream to be. But the sole purpose is to protect that water from the inevitable leaks leaks and oft experienced spills. The EPA has been recommending for more than 3 decades that states use one-time setbacks, they use time-based setbacks over the distance-based ones. They're more flexible. We currently have a distance-based one. The testing is based on groundwater movement, which mostly depends on the type of soil around the landfill. Some soils like gravel allow more rapid flow than soils like clay, as the senator from District 1 spoke. It is essential that we know how fast groundwater flows in order to know how much time will be needed for an appropriate response if a leak or a contaminant is detected. That response is the remedy. In the case of my neighborhood, that response is a Superfund cleanup. But we knew before, we knew ahead of time that this shouldn't happen. The more years, this is one of the things that I found very confusing until this was explained to me by multiple hydrogeologists. Years are not random. The more years that are allowed in statute, the more certain you can be that there will be enough time to stop the leak and remove the contaminant before it has a chance to reach the body or source of water you want to protect. Average migration time across the country can vary from 3 years to 28 years. The average is 8 years. Maine uses 6. Vermont, Massachusetts don't allow new landfills. Neighboring states, and this amendment actually picks one of the most lenient times, which is 5 years, and then allows for you to subtract if the person putting in the landfill is really putting in something that will mitigate the flow. The reasonable protection of our pristine watersheds afforded by this amendment will set a measurable, attainable, and standard metric for future expansion or siting of landfills in New Hampshire. This is not about one landfill. This is about making sure we learn from the past and we're as smart as we possibly can moving forward with as much flexibility as we can possibly give to the developers. So I hope you'll pass this amendment. Thank you.